Hey. Right. Welcome. This will be, oh wow, the fourth episode? Maybe fifth. I think it's the fourth. Fourth episode of the Vital Vortex. And I'm going to be joined by Brooke Conley, the Visceral PT. And it's going to be flowing a little bit different today, I think. I think we're both going to be sharing a bit about our work instead of just me asking the questions. And yeah, here she is. Let's see if she can join. Right. Okay, so did this last time as well, Brooke. I think the best way is for you to maybe cancel your request if you can, and then I'll send you an invitation. See if, all right, there you go. So I can cancel right now. I've sent you an invite. Let's see if that. Yes.
There we go. Hi,
Great. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good. Cool.
I'm glad we got this to work.
Yeah. After the little mix up with the times, but how was
Yeah.
your time in the Bahamas? Were you working out there?
Yeah. Yeah. My husband and I finally went on our honeymoon after like a year and a half. And yeah, we spent a week on this like little island called Eleuthera. And Eleuthera is on the more like Atlantic side of the Bahamas. So it's a great surf spot.
Cool.
You get the best of both worlds of like the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. So it was really magical.
Oh, amazing. I'm glad you had a good time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, I can introduce myself and say a little
Please
bit
do.
about what I do.
Please do.
Um, yeah, so I'm Brooke. I'm the Visceral PT. I'm a physical therapist over here in the United States, and I kind of consider myself to be on the fringe of like normal physiotherapy,
Mhm.
physical therapy. I'm trained in visceral mobilization, craniosacral therapy, myofascial release, neural mobilization, and unofficially trained in energy healing, which has been something that's kind of evolved in my practice just from like working with people. It's something that I think I've kind of stepped into a remembrance of how to do. Um, and yeah, and then on top of that, I incorporate more like Pilates based movement because movement is so important for like helping heal the body as well. So I kind of hit a lot of the different facets of deep, profound healing with people and my patients. It's very fun.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've seen that on your Instagram actually. It's intriguing. I think I resonate with well everything I've seen on there so far. So when you're working with your clients, are you able to blend the energy work kind of with the more what could we say recognized sort of massage techniques or bodywork techniques?
Yeah, it all kind of happens together. I don't really separate them out too much
Mhm.
unless, of course, steps into my treatment room and they've had like a huge emotional upset and all I see on their body is like the energetics of it. But a lot of the times I'm using my energetic intuition to kind of like assess as I'm working on people. I will get pulled into different systems in the body. So my hands will feel one thing, but like energetically I'll feel other other things. So I get a lot of information kind of collectively, whether that's from say like the organs or the nervous system or the energy body is like a big one. Um, so it's been yeah, it's been kind of a fun thing is the more that I've practiced on people, the more my skills have expanded and it feels like what I've been stepping into is something that a lot of other body workers and healers are starting to wake up to as well in this period, this crazy period of humanity on Earth right now.
Yeah.
And it really does seem like this is the future of medicine is intuiting what's happening in the human body.
Mm. So can I ask how long have you been working with the body, or how long were you working with the body before the intuitive energy work came in?
Oh man. Um, Probably about like I would say a year,
Okay.
but yeah, it happened relatively fast. I remember like have you ever read Joe Dispenza's book, Becoming Supernatural?
I haven't read it, but I have heard a fair bit about that.
So
So I kind of know.
he kind of like explained my process a little bit, which I thought was fascinating. He talks a lot about how the ability to sense the space around us helps sort of like wake up our awareness. Like our conscious awareness will expand just by the practice of closing your eyes and like seeing how much air you can feel around your body. And so when I was developing my hands-on skills with like fascial work and that kind of a thing, what I was sort of unaware that I was doing was I was closing my eyes and I was visualizing three-dimensionally what was between my hands when I was working on people. I was sort of like tuning into that three-dimensional space in their bodies. And as I continued to practice that awareness, I started to pick up on things that were a little bit, you know, I don't unorthodox for like a physical therapist to detect, right? Like I started to feel these like big waves of emotion that would come over me when I was working on my patients. And I was like, that's weird. Like, that's not my feeling. So whose feeling is this? And it took me a little bit of time to, I don't gain the courage to talk to my patients about what I was picking up on because, there's a period when your consciousness is expanding where you think like, oh man, this is all happening in my head. Like this is just my imagination. And then it turns out that everything that happens in your imagination is actually information coming in, like meaningful, important information coming in. So that I think the more that I accepted that, the more that I kind of trusted that the information I was receiving was meaningful and important, the faster my skills started to sharpen. So
Yeah.
overall, I
Yeah.
think that's quick.
Can you? It might be tricky, but can you remember the first time that you had this sense of awareness? Do you remember the first treatment or client where you were like, "Hey, something's happening." Yeah. Would you mind telling me about it?
Yeah. So I was working on this woman. She, I think she was referred to me by one of my coworkers when I was at the last clinic that I was working at. Um, she had a lot of stuff going on. She had a lot of vascular issues. She was having a lot of swelling in her body. She was having a lot of chronic pain and just on and off nerve pain in her lower body. And I remember I had her like on my table, and I always start down at the feet when I'm kind of tuning into someone's body. I'll always start down at their feet and just get like a big picture of like what I sense. And I remember feeling just by like holding onto her feet, I remember feeling like I was getting pulled into her pelvis. It felt like this like magnet was just like sort of pulling my awareness there. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that's where we're going to start. I don't really know why. I don't really know, how or why this might be contributing to what you're experiencing, but that's where we're going to start. And when I got to her pelvis, I slid one hand under her and I had one hand on top, and I was just feeling really, really lightly. And I remember feeling this sensation. It wasn't like muscles, it wasn't fascia. It felt like a bubble was sort of between my hands. And I think that was the first time that I had like felt energy with my hands, something that was beyond just like the physical tissues. And when I tuned into that bubble, when I was sort of like, attending to that and being like, what is this?
Mm.
Without saying anything out loud, that was when I felt this like massive wave of grief come over me. And
Right.
I just was like, I was just like, oh, like totally taken aback by it. And it was so strong and it was so real that I was like, I have to ask her about this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I did. I like had the courage to like chat with her a little bit and say like, this is something that I'm feeling really intensely. Have you recently lost anybody that you're close to? And she just erupted in tears on the table. And she
Mm.
told me her sister had recently died and she's been struggling and struggling to cope, and to manage her grief. And as she was talking about it, I could feel that bubble of energy in her pelvis move up towards the right side of her rib cage and up basically off of her right shoulder. I could feel it move
Mm.
like just as she was expressing this. And by the end of the session, she was like, I don't have any pain anymore.
Yeah,
And I was okay, that's pretty meaningful.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So
And,
it's been a, it's been a bit of a journey learning about the different layers of like what contributes to like pain and dysfunction in the body. Physical therapists are taught, and I'm sure to some degree massage therapists also are taught that like, there is a physical reason. There's a physical thing. When you go to like the doctor and they send you to an MRI, they're going to see the changes in the anatomy, and they're going to be like, well, that's why you're having pain because there's obviously those changes. But
mhm.
there's just so much more that can inform what somebody's experiencing in their body. So yeah, it's pretty wild.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So it was consistent after that first experience. Like every sort of treatment coming along, there was some sort of was it manifesting in different ways? Your experience of the sort of energy.
Yeah, every patient has been like a little bit different, and I feel like every patient has taught me more about the way things can present and the almost like the synchronicities of, where certain emotions are held and carried in the organs or regions of the body. Like for example, this is gets pretty wild, but um, I think it took me a handful of patients to finally be like, okay, that's a pattern. Um,
Mm.
when I will get pulled into somebody's leg, whether it's the right leg or the left leg, energetically, there's almost always some kind of ancestral karma that person is working through. And usually, if it's the right leg, it's a maternal ancestral thing, or if it's the left leg, it's a paternal ancestral thing. Um, and this is something that kind of I connected with like down the road as I got more and more experience, and I started to see it be introduced generally to a lot of different aspects of like the energetic realm, right? Like the things that influence us energetically, and past lives are a big one, and ancestral karma is a really really big one. So
Cool. Cool. Hey,
yeah, I'm
would you
curious. Have you experienced anything with like your clients in massage? Have you experienced anything similar?
well, it's really interesting you say these things because quite often, not every time, but quite often there'll be, afterwards, the client or the recipient of the massage will say, "Ah, did you did you notice this, or did you feel this? There was something going on," and then to be perfectly honest, I don't think I'm fully attuned to kind of pick up on in such depth what they're sort of experiencing. I think that my ability, maybe a bit of a talent, is currently just lies in the creating of the space for them to feel that. But I can't lock into to what it is, But there's been a few times when there's been, you know, tears or yeah, it's tears. I can, I mean, I think anybody could be wrong, but I think anyone who's experienced grief to an extent can recognize it in others, especially when it's manifesting actually physically, not just through an energetic sort of experience, but when someone releases emotions through tears, it's like, oh, I, that, that's grief, and I can usually recognize that, but I've given treatments with just sound. Just last month, actually, this happened, and the lady afterwards was telling me about there was this experience going on of smoke and fire, and she was like, "What is it? Like, what's going on? What did you feel? What did you sense?" And I was like, "Ah, there wasn't anything there for me. It's like I can't quite get into that maybe it's a mindset. Maybe it's a mindset that I need to enter into to kind of. I'm not sure. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this because I've given that like I've gone through, this isn't like a gift that I was born with. And maybe some
Mm,
people have a little bit more intuitive connection through their lifetime, but it's a skill that I developed. And I've thought about this a lot, and I was like, I think every human has the capacity to
mm,
telepathically connect, to energetically connect, um, to enter into this space of, I don't know, I call it the energy realm, but basically
mm,
like to be able to connect into the vast amount of information that's there. It
mm,
just takes, the right like practicable skills. And what's beneficial with you is that you have clients that you have the space where you actually can have the repetition to get a good amount of
mm,
practice on a regular basis. And so what I have kind of found is that if you when like because you're clearly picking up on something, like you're clearly connecting with your clients in that way. What I would say is like continue to hold space and then open your senses up. Like that feeling of, when you're first learning massage and you're learning how to listen with your hands,
mm,
you're learning how to feel for the different, like knots in the muscle or different patterns of tension or in the fascia. You're learning to really like open and listen with your hands. When you connect with the body energetically, information will come in through all of your senses. It'll come in through, your mind's eye. It'll come in through sound. It'll come in through smell. It'll come in through feel. And then it will come in also through like cognition. Like a thought will just sort of enter into your mind. And
mm,
it takes some time to like get to the place where you're like, oh, that wasn't just a coincidence. That was like a signal. That was information. But when you're holding space for your clients, I would say try to shift into that state, that awareness where you're trying to receive. Like you're trying to like be like, okay, what am I hearing? What am I feeling? What am I sensing? And just the more you practice opening up your awareness in that regard, the more and more and more information will start to come through. But
yeah.
it takes time. Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about putting together like a virtual class to
Mm,
to start teaching people how to do this. It's in like its very, very early stages, but
mm,
I think enough of us these days are aware that there's something more, there's like something behind the veil of what we can like
yeah.
tangibly feel and see. And
Yeah.
more and more people are starting to become curious about how do you access that. And I think it's the same reason that like psychedelics are like, such a huge topic of conversation right now too, because
Mm,
psychedelics are kind of like a shortcut into that awareness. It's like suddenly, your mind is expanded and you can sense things, you can feel energy, you can start to pick up on things, and it's exhilarating to be able to sense more than just what we know in the third dimensional world.
yeah. Yeah. It becomes tangible, I guess, in those sort of states, doesn't it? Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that. It's something um what it's led me to do, this sort of, I guess, lack of intuitive connection to the other person. It's always led me to kind of perceive and believe that it's for it's for them. It's if I somehow unpack it any further, I'm taking something from them. I'm taking an opportunity from them. But that could just be my me trying to like make up for not being able to say, oh yeah, it's this. And when they ask me these questions, I say it's I'm just here to create the space for you to be able to go within and start to recognize these things. And if it doesn't click instantly, it may be something that comes over the next few days, or often in their first night of rest, something shifts. They start to recognize something, because essentially I'm working with the fascia and the nervous system. I'm doing my best to try and get a pretty direct response from the nervous system. I say I say it's like a massage for the nervous system, but it's not just a gentle, light little massage for the nervous system. It's a stimulus, and it there are points where the nervous system may be in an active, heightened state before it can swing back like a pendulum effect. Create like a gentle pendulum effect, swinging it deeper into the resting, into the parasympathetic. And I like to, yeah, I do my best to bring them into the. Some people recognize this and they're quite aware of what's happened, but they recognize they've come into the deepest state of stillness or rest they've ever experienced, and in that state, that is usually where they recognize these sort of have these profound realizations about something they're holding, or something they have just let go of, or direction, a bit of clarity formed. But
Yeah.
you can't react with it. But it shifts. I know it's gonna keep changing and
Yeah.
progressing.
I love that though. It's so important to approach those sessions with respect, and it sounds like you do
Mm,
a good job of like holding that boundary of saying like this is about my all of my attention, all of my awareness is like on my client, on my patient. Um, but what I would like to add to that is that anytime that we are working with somebody, it's an exchange. There's always an energetic exchange. And,
mhm,
even like talking to somebody, that's an energetic exchange. And when
mm,
you're doing healing work, whatever capacity that is, it's an even deeper level of exchange. And so I've gotten I've gotten this reminder many times where I receive so much from my patient appointments, my sessions, that it's humbling. It's humbling.
mm,
It's helping you kind of shift out of that mindset of like I'm doing to you. Instead, it's like I'm opening up a space for whatever the dynamic needs to be is what it needs to be. Your energy is opening the door for your clients to experience whatever shifts they need to in their physical body, but the opposite is true as well. There needs to be movement in both directions.
yeah,
um, and so you can think maybe even just going into that place where you're like humbled and you have the humility of being like, okay, I also am receiving here and I'm opening up to whatever this exchange is. That
mm,
might be able to, I mean, at least from what I found when I've been kind of pushed into that place, my patients have experienced even deeper healing than I don't know. Those sessions are mind
mm.
blowing to me.
It
Um,
makes sense. It makes sense.
yeah, yeah, and I don't know. Western medicine is so like the formalities of it. It's like the doctor does the healing work. But
Mm,
really the body knows exactly what it needs to heal, and we're just sort of like opening up the energetics of it. We're sort of facilitating the flow, but that flow can't just be one directional.
Yeah. I'm with that. That brings me to a thought. I was speaking to a Reiki master, and it was we were discussing. Well, I was asking about the practitioner's nervous system state at the point of doing a session. And
Hmm.
are you aware of, or conscious of yours whilst you're doing your treatment? Do you do you feel can you put it into a binary of parasympathetic or sympathetic, like active or resting, or does it shift through, or is it neutral?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts?
So I do, yeah, and it's fascinating too to think about it, to put it in the terms of like the binary of like parasympathetic and sympathetic is
Mm,
almost like doing it a disservice because there's so
mm,
much more to it than just the state of the nervous system. But it's very similar to when you step into like a meditative state. Your brain waves shift into that theta wave, which is inherently like a parasympathetic place to be. Um,
mm,
and so I've definitely found that when I am in more of an elevated state, like if my if I'm like really excited or I'm really, in that elevated state, I have a harder time tuning into my patients.
yeah.
And that's always been like the indicator for me is like when I'm not able to sense things in the way that I'm used to and the way that I feel comfortable, that means that I need to, take a step back and like take a couple deep breaths or do a quick grounding, meditation, whatever I need to kind of like drop down a little bit so that then I
Mm.
can, you know, open
So
myself
you
up
can
to the,
receive,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, yeah. I feel that. I feel that. I think I think when I'm doing my treatments, it probably shifts. I think it might shift almost potentially as drastically as theirs may shift. I think I might be on the pendulum with them throughout, especially if I'm using instruments as well,
Mhm.
and when I'm and guiding the breath also, and some of the releases, depending on who I'm working with and how it's going, some of the releases they require a fair bit of pressure. I don't like to force it, but there is a fair bit of pressure involved.
Mhm.
So, and I like to work on the ground, on a mat, on cushions and stuff, make it cozy. But I'm on the ground, and I'm moving around in quite an active way. So
Mhm.
I feel I am, yeah, I'm working. By the end of it, I, I'm just as calm as they are most of the time, if not even calmer. So
Yeah,
there is,
that's
that'll be that
amazing.
receiving that you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that
exactly.
exchange. Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's elements of it. There's definitely elements of it happening.
Yeah.
And now I can recognize that I might be able to expand on it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say just practice thinking about like, when you're working with somebody, yeah, because I would imagine so when you're doing your sessions, you're like moving around the patient, you're very like you said you're very like active with it.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well,
So
not like constantly round and round and round, but I'm on the ground, and I'm aware of the positions that I'm holding my body in, and yeah. So there is. So this brings me to, I believe the structure of the body should behave a certain way to alleviate pain, and I think I do my best to stay aware of that through the movement around the client. So I am, yeah, I'm actively engaged in certain parts of my system I'm aware of my posture and aware of how
yeah,
I'm applying pressure.
that's that's so good. So you're probably already tuning into the space that you're creating around
Mhm.
your patient. So it might even be a better entry point for you to think about like, what else do I feel in the space around us?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I describe too is like developing that energetic awareness. It's very similar to feeling like, somebody's in a room with you. You can feel that there's somebody taking up space somewhere in the room, even if you aren't looking
Yeah.
at them. Um, and so the more you kind of practice that type of awareness, especially like in your client sessions, I'm sure you'll start to receive so much information about like, even more than what you're probably already receiving around
Mm,
like how to posture yourself, how to match your patient, how to move with your patient's body or based off, whatever they're emanating. So
mm,
that's cool. That's
mm.
super cool. How did you
Yeah.
get into
Oh, I didn't hear those
oh,
last words that you said.
I was asking, how did you get into breath work?
Ah, so, oh, I spent from 17, 18-ish to 27. I was basically a full-time athlete in various martial arts, and then eventually becoming a professional boxer. And that whole time, I wasn't aware of it, but that whole time I was obviously, it was all about controlling of the breath and learning how to regulate the breath, because essentially you're in a fight or flight sort of situation, but you're trying to remain calm to an extent where you can actually rationalize strategy and understand what is happening, instead of just losing everything. So that whole time I was learning how to have control over my breath and how to regulate it, and when to step into it, when I needed to activate myself through my breath. But it wasn't until around um yeah, I was 27, I think it was, when I really started to sit with just that. I dropped out all the movement training because I quit the boxing. And just I had a strange moment actually walking to the ring where yeah, I just had this rude awakening to this idea that I was just essentially a clown in a circus, walking out in front of a bunch of people who were, drunk and whatnot, and I was just their entertainment, and I was putting my life bet on the line, and so was my opponent, and it just seemed like this ridiculous thing, completely ridiculous. So yeah, that then led me to drift away from it, and what I would what I started doing was sitting and getting into meditation, and it was kind of like what is the what is the point now? Because I'd given up this thing that I was doing for so long, which was combat, and I was so heavily driven by what the physical body can do, and how much it can do. And then all of a sudden, that just seemed completely irrelevant to my logic. It was just almost for a moment. For a while, I perceived it as a waste of time, and I spent so much time just sitting and breathing and thinking like, what's going on? Like, what is this? And that led me into this study of different yogic techniques and Vedic scriptures and all different scriptures and philosophy. I guess you could maybe say slightly, maybe esoteric sort of path kind of unfolded as I went, yeah, maybe slightly into mysticism, maybe. Um,
Mhm,
and I'm sure you know yourself that at some point is probably going to lead you to some kind of psychedelic like experience,
mhm,
which then, yeah, gave me this realization that the breath was the source of your energy. It's where it all stems from, and it's the sort of the first thing that happens when we come out, and the last thing that happens in our body before we leave it. And so I went on quite a journey of exploration of trying to optimize it, I suppose. And then through optimization of it and self study, I was trying to optimize it. And in the process of trying to optimize my breath, I was limiting my breath. I did some strange things. I went 9 days where I didn't eat. 4 of those days I didn't drink, and I was even limiting how much breath I could take for um 3 meditations a day. I would only breathe once a minute. Um, yeah, strange things that solidified this kind of. I mean, I claim it's a knowing of the power of breath and the importance of it. And
Hmm.
then that is what led me to bringing it in to everything that I do, even the movement training. The breath is the foundation. The massage treatments, the breath is the foundation. The sound journeys that I'm doing, it's all around the breath as well.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so, so cool to have like a profound moment of even just like receiving that knowing of the importance and the significance of breath is, it's it's that moment that like diverges your path and I think creates like a new
Yeah,
that's so, so cool.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and what I'm curious about too, this is something kind of like looping back to like your martial arts experience. This has been something that I've been curious about because, so much of martial arts, like various forms, is, you know, connecting really deeply with your body and learning how to control and refine movement and even build energy in your body so that you can have like a powerful exertion of energy
yeah.
outside of your body and like I find that so fascinating. Have you continued to incorporate like certain like martial arts techniques in your movements?
Yeah. I still, yeah, it's fun. It's fun for me. It's fun for me. So I do continue with um shadow boxing. Yeah, you heard the term shadow boxing.
Yeah, yeah,
Basically,
yeah.
you're just sparring with pretending to fight the air. Basically, like they're going through the movements. But it's not that often that I put impact behind it now. Every now and then when I go to the gym, I'll hit the punching bags or I'll kick the punching bags. But it's not that often that I really feel the call for that sort of impactive feedback.
Hmm.
Um, but when I'm going through the motions without the impact, there is, yeah. I mean, I've always been into, the old martial arts movies and sort of kung fu and those, even animes. The Airbender anime. I
Oh
don't know if
yeah.
you're familiar with it. So like, yeah. So there is always this sort of, and like Jedi's, and so there's always this. It's in my mind. It's like, okay, here is the energy, and I'm feeling it rise through the ground and through the myofascial meridian. So there is this physical tangibleness to what is happening, especially as I really emphasize on the kind of transverse motions, whether it's in martial arts or whether it's in running or the mechanics of throwing or swinging something. I really emphasize on this transverse movement, but from the ground, from the base. So having that engagement right from the plantar fascia right the way through the back line of the hamstring, through the glutes, crossing over the transverse abdominis to the lat on the other side, and then down the arm. So yeah, there is definitely emphasis on the cultivation of energy from the ground up. So you could you could put that into, yeah, I guess you could say that is maybe similar to how the Tai Chi, and they're like horse stance or
I was
something, how
just
they're
thinking, I think
drawing energy upwards.
yeah, I think Tai Chi is that kind of the medium where maybe you're not like exerting force, but you're still learning to move energy through your body in a similar way.
Yeah. Did
It's
you
so fast.
ever practice any martial arts? Did you ever
No,
do a bit of martial art?
no, but I've been drawn to it. I've been drawn to it. Somebody, a mentor of mine, like a few years back, was he's brilliant. He trained with like Buddhist monks, you know, back when he was like in his
Mm.
early 20s, and speaks Sanskrit, and he's very, very knowledgeable. And he was introducing me to the concept of like meditation broken down into like hot meditation versus cold meditation. And I was like, I've never heard of that. Like, I've only ever heard of like, you know, you just meditate, you know, you sit down and you just
Yeah.
like clear your mind. Um, and he was explaining that, you know, when Westerners kind of came to these like Buddhist areas and were wanting to learn about meditation, the the mentors there were like they saw kind of the Western thing, you know, the colonialism, and so they only taught cold meditation because they didn't want to add any more fire to these like
Mm.
Westerners. And so cold meditation is what we know in Western society as just like meditation, where you sit quietly and you clear your mind and
That
you know, you feel,
surrender.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
there's this other domain of meditation, which is called hot meditation, where it's very, very active and you build heat in your body and you build energy in your tendons. Um, which then I think what he was kind of saying translates, it's part of the training program for like kung fu, and you know, learning how to build like tension in your tendons and that energy so that you can then expend that energy really, really quickly. Um, and hot meditation is, you know, where you will hold a very active pose. The one that he kind of showed me, you're standing in a bit of like a mini squat, and you have your arms kind of like hugging, like imagine like you're hugging a tree,
Mm.
and you are expanding in every joint of your body while maintaining that posture as still as you can. And then you just hold that for like, you know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you work into that. um, and what's cool about it is that it's like it's completely different than, you know, just going off into your mind. It's so much in your body that you don't have a choice but to be in like a meditative
Yeah.
state, you know.
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
yeah, so it's super fascinating. And so ever since kind of learning about that, I've been like, oh, I've been curious about, you know, different martial arts as a way to move energy in your own body, you know, because
Mm.
you know, I'm working on somebody, it's a very passive experience physically. You know, people are, you know, they're there and they're kind of just receiving, and I'm sort of moving the energy in their body. But it's cool to think about things like various martial arts, or like Tai Chi, as a way to do your own energy work, like to move energy in your own body through these very like specific controlled movements. So I'm just, yeah, I'm fascinated by it. But similar to you,
Yeah.
the impact aspects of it don't really appeal to me. And I can't remember the name. You probably know it. There's like one form of martial arts where it's all about like masterful deflection. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh,
It's,
the maybe there's a few, but I think some people think Aikido. Was it Aikido?
yeah,
Yeah,
Aikido. I think,
there's a few. There's a few where they talk about transferring the opponent's energy through you back onto
yeah,
them, basically.
yeah, yeah. So I thought about that one for a little bit. I was like, maybe Aikido would be a kind of a cool way to learn how to like work with energy, the physical body.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, haven't ventured
Yeah.
into it too much.
You know, when you say about the hot and cold meditation, it's interesting because I've always perceived myself when doing meditation or sharing meditation as I find there are two main main ways. One of them being, I suppose, what you would call cold, and it would be the focus. Strange to use focus, but is surrender. It's letting go. It's not holding. It's not to hold. It's not to direct. It's just to completely allow. And sometimes it isn't the easiest thing to do whilst sat up because you find you're kind of
Mhm.
folding because as you begin to let go, your body, my body tends to follow, and I end up having to kind of wedge myself in an upright position or be in shavasana sort of position.
Hmm.
And then I find it very useful for settling, for resting. And the other style form that I would be doing is what I see and feel as the sharpening of awareness, a honing of awareness. It's maybe not quite a grabbing hold of the awareness, but it is. Yeah, I always I visualize a sort of triangulating sort of really almost like sharpening a pencil or a stick, right the way to this
Hmm.
finest point possible, and just holding that visualization and holding the awareness on this tiniest little point, and doing that, I find the bandhas, the bandhas mentioned yoga, like the Mula Bandha, Dhyana Bandha,
Hmm.
these different kind of these different locks, subtle locks, but some of them are. I mean, they're all physical as much as they are energetical, as far as I'm concerned. And but the engagement of these in the process does create this within myself, this sensation of a rising right the way from the root, right up the center, through through the yeah, right up to this top, and then this super sharp little point. And it can be tricky for me to maintain it for long periods of time if I'm not already in a reasonable kind of place when I begin this. It can take me a while to get into that point of focus, and when I do that, that's when I really feel like I can direct my
Yeah.
experience, take hold of my experience. Whereas the other method I speak of, it kind of allows me to flow with the experience, but yeah, simply surrendering to the flow of the experience. But whereas the other way, it gets like it gives me a paddle, so I can steer it, I can direct it in a certain way. I guess that would
Mhm.
be the exchange. I'm giving a lot of effort, I'm giving energy and focus and awareness and tension, like literally the tension of the mind to enter
Mhm.
that state, and then it allows me to direct. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's such a cool revelation to have. I was I think I saw this somewhere on Instagram, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's so accurate. When we are practicing, different types of meditation, but specifically the ones where you're concentrating on like, a single point, kind of like what
mm,
you were describing. It's a way of training your awareness to put more of your energy into one thing, right? Um, to not be so porous and like let your energy sort of just go scattered around because it weakens you.
mm,
When we have our attention split on like multiple things, we don't really have our attention placed well on anything. And so what's cool about practicing that like that very fine-tuned specific focus of meditation is you are building your strength and your ability to channel your energy to one point, and in that you're creating your own energetic boundaries. You're saying like, no, I'm not open, I'm not receptive to these other things. My attention is here and this is what I'm working.
mm,
And then when you can hone that skill, then it's like you can almost come into those more relaxed, go with the flow states of meditation better because you have a sense of that boundary. You have a
mm,
sense of self versus other. You're not leaking any of your energy. You
mm,
can channel it, but in a relaxed way where you trust that like your energy can engage with other energies or whatever's around you or engaging with you in a way that you're not being drained by it. It's still formed. It's still, boundaries are amazing. I actually had a patient session where we were working on this, um, literally yesterday. And this patient I was working with, she has some challenges in the left side of her body because she didn't have like a strong father figure pretty much her entire life. She only had her mom and then her brother. And so, you know, kind of given in my experience, I've found that the left side of the body is the masculine side, which I think goes against some of Chinese medicine, but at least that's what I have been reinforced in my practice.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were working through this, I was seeing like all of this. It just felt like her body was like more placid, like more weak on her left side. And I was like, okay, well, what do we do with this? Like, how do we rectify this? And I got this like download that was like help her connect to her inner fire. You know, again, kind of coming back to the masculine, feminine. You know, feminine is a lot of like water. It's boundless. You know, it's a lot of coloring outside the lines. It's free flow. Whereas masculine tends to be very fiery, but very like, you know, structured and organized
Mm.
and stable. And, you know, we need both. Everybody has a balance of both in their bodies. Um, and it wasn't that she needed some outside influence of like a father figure for her to be able to access this in herself. Everybody has already what they need to be whole within themselves. It's just
Mm.
about remembering that. And so I got this download while we were working together for her to access her fire, which anger, you know, anger is that fire. Use that energy of anger to help you establish boundaries. I mean, that's the power of feeling like anger and frustration. It motivates you to either make a change or to establish a boundary. And when you can establish a boundary, you have a better sense of self and a better sense of other. And in that, you can when you start to have those boundaries, then you start to feel more self-empowered, you start to feel more connected to yourself. And it was just like such a cool moment where I was like, wow, like I never thought
Mm.
about using the element of fire and anger to solidify some of those, like, you know, that need for structure and stability in like my patient before. But it was just like such a cool moment, and I can't even remember how I got on this.
Yeah,
But
wow.
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
you're alchemizing certain emotions, I guess, transmuting them
yeah,
to. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Um,
good.
so, so I wonder if you have time. Earlier, you mentioned about ancestral trauma and past lives. I wonder if you have enough time to expand on them, and if you could maybe explain them to me, as like I am pretty new to those, to actual understandings of those concepts. I've heard the words for a while, but yeah, I wouldn't say I'd be able to properly explain them. I wonder if you could.
Yeah. So I think this kind of gets us down to like the building blocks of like what even is karma. And you know, it's a word I think a lot of people will use but don't really grasp the deeper meaning of it. Karma is simply like a cause and effect. It's not bad, good, it's neutral, it's just a thing, it's a cause and effect. You know,
Yep.
you create an action and then that has a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, maybe it's a good ripple effect, maybe it's not so good, maybe it's neutral. And so, you know, over the course of human history, there is quite an accumulation of different types of karma. And, you know, some of that karma doesn't ever kind of get neutralized, it sort of sticks around.
Yeah.
Um, and it's easiest to kind of relate to, you know, karma in the sense of like, you know, something bad, like you did, you know, you made a choice, maybe you like ghosted somebody on like a after a first date or something, and that created a lot of abandonment and kind of like isolation issues or amplified that in that person, and that's a ripple effect, right? That's a karmic ripple effect. And um, we each carry karma that is from our lifetimes, from our past lifetimes, but also from our ancestors. And so this is why this period of time on earth is like so profound, because so many people are doing this like really deep inner work now. Like therapy is normalized. Everybody's doing therapy. Everyone's going to therapy. People are exploring psychedelics and they're working through their own, their own trauma and their own grief. And when you can kind of confront, we'll say grief because that's been like a topic, when you can kind of confront your grief, maybe you can link it to a specific experience in this lifetime, but chances are it's a pattern. It's something that has been sort of continuing through your ancestral line or maybe from a past life, and it's coming forward in a really big way for you in this lifetime so that you can address it and you can clear it and you can get to the bottom of whatever that grief ultimately is. And I could be wrong, but at least in my experience, almost all of our challenging feelings, whether it's anger, grief, abandonment, hurt, betrayal, all of it comes down to connection and worthiness of love. So many of us feel, that we are unworthy of love in some capacity. It can be related to money. It could be, related to a lot of different things. It can manifest in a lot of different ways. But when we can really get to like the root of whatever our stuff is, not only are we healing that for ourselves, but we're healing it for our past lives across dimensions and ancestrally too. And what I often find when I'm working with my patients where they have like an ancestral line come up, it'll be it's it's not necessarily, the exact same story where like, my patient experienced this like profound loss of like maybe her father. Ancestrally, she may have had like a great grandfather who experienced like the trauma of a loss of like a loved one. And so it's not that like ancestral karma is the exact same story, but it's the feeling that kind of carries on. The emotion is what gets carried on. And so that's why like this period of time of being a human on earth is like so important, because we are just mostly kind of focusing on our own individual healing work, but without realizing it, we are clearing this emotional frequency, not just for ourselves, but for our entire ancestral line. And then I don't know if you know this, but there's also a ripple effect in the people around you as well. There's just so many layers that are affected when we just focus on doing our own healing work. It's profound.
Yeah, I could definitely understand the ripple effect in the circles around me. I just it's I guess it's a little bit of a theme of the conversations, but I guess of this conversation, I guess I haven't opened up wide enough to be aware of anything beyond that, such as ancestral or maybe past lives. At one point I I kind of dived in a bit into the past life sort of thing. It was it was while I was fasting actually, because I felt very uh, open to receive. I felt very connected, should I say? And so I would meditate, and I would try and try and allow myself to drift back into something that I may have been or may have experienced, and I just kept finding myself going back to some sort of Charles Dickens, like I think it was Oliver Twist or something. I kept just envisioning myself as a chimney sweep in London, just covered in soot. And I don't know whether it was just a story that was stuck in my head, but you it was just I was just a young child working that didn't appear to have family, but I just it didn't like hit home and like, oh yeah, that must have been a past
Hmm.
life. It was just like, oh, that's just
Just
my
your
imagination.
yeah,
But it was enjoyable. Like it was an enjoyable sort of vision or like experience sort of thing.
yeah.
But nothing had quite solidified. I mean, with psychedelics, there's been um experiences where in that point of time I've been adamant that I was it was one ceremony. This one was in Mexico. I was um remember standing for some reason. I stood and I had like a shawl around me and I put it over my head because it got dark and it was getting a bit cold, so I had it draped over my head and I looked down and my hands and my arms had become very feminine like and somehow I could see my reflection in the air and I was like, well, I'm Mary, like the mother of Jesus. And then I
Mm,
was like, oh, that's strange. And I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, that's who I was. That's who I've been in the past. And then uh, once that once I'd accepted that, I looked down and my hands had changed, and then I you know then I'd become Jesus, and I was like, oh, what? No, I was Jesus. And then as soon as I'd accepted that, my arms multiplied, and I became like Ganesh like, and then Shiva like, and I had all these arms, and I was like, well, I'm that. And then it just, as soon as I accepted these different archetypes as they came through, it would just shift to the next one, the next one, the next one, and it was a long process. There was no fear involved. There was just a lot of amazement and awe at this, and during that time, I was like, oh, so we're all of them. Like
mm,
we're all of them because I guess it's. And then there was this kind of taste of the infinite
mhm.
in that moment,
That's
and then it morphed. And I was kind of bad archetypes maybe, yeah, like Genghis Khan. I was some sort of emperor that was yeah doing horrific sort of things, and yeah, it just would morph through all of these things. But I accepted them because I was quite on my meditation process at that time, and I could step back even in those heightened states. I could step back, observe, and just go, okay, I'll accept that. I'll accept that, and like I say, as soon as I accepted, it would boom onto the next one. So I think that's
mhm.
my sort of closest kind of experience of any sort of taste of these past life sort of things. Have you've had experiences of your past lives?
Yeah, my own experiences of my past lives have been when I've been doing healing sessions, when I've been receiving healing sessions.
Mm.
Um, it's always come up from my body, there'll be like a portion of my body. Like one of the sessions that I had done recently was fascial work, and my like left leg from like the knee down felt like it was just I didn't have good proprioceptive awareness of it. Like it just felt like I had like a wooden peg leg.
Oh, yeah.
um I remember during the session just being like, yeah, like I don't really even feel that part of my body very well. And it was kind of facilitated and came through the person I was working with that I had been a World War One vet, and I had lost my leg. It was actually amputated from like the knee down. And I was like, that feels really true. Like, when you
Mm.
hear
Yeah.
something and you're like, that resonates so much, but like, I don't have any specific remembrance of it, but like my body does. Like, my body like feels it. And it sounds like your experience is a little bit different, but what I love about your experience is that you were like, in a sense, you were kind of experiencing past lives because um, all of us at a certain level are all the same. We're all like
Mm.
one consciousness. And so it sounds like in your experience, you got to go up to such a high level that from that viewpoint down, you got to see all the projections of human consciousness and their different forms and their
Mm.
different levels, like from the like ascended masters to some of the more um, sinister,
Yeah. Yeah.
sinister.
Yeah.
But all of it, it's all the same. We're all the same. The more we can um, sort of accept the good and the bad and all of it, and just observe and accept it, the more integrated it will be. Um,
Yeah.
but one thing that I have found with, you know, past life work, with ancestral work, the 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 memories themselves aren't really so important. The focus really is on the feeling. And, if you have something that you have just been plagued with for a long time, you know, anger, grief, whatever it might be, and it's been hard to work through all the layers of it, it's almost certain that that is some kind of longer standing experience. And, you know, connecting to the specific memory is like, sometimes it's nice to have that contextual information, but it's not necessary
Mm.
to do the work. It's really just focusing on like what is the feeling that comes up, like what is the thing that feels so stuck in your body. Personally, mine's grief. Mine grief is a big one for me. And for me, like I lost my dad in 2012. He was like one of the most important people in my life, and it was a really profound experience, and it taught me a lot about myself. And I remember just like, at different stages since then being like, yeah, I feel like I've really worked through a lot of it. I feel like I've worked through a lot of it. And then I'll have another thing happen where it will just completely amplify those same feelings. And, the deeper I go, the more complex it becomes. It's not just about, losing a loved one for me. It's about feeling abandoned. It's about feeling rejected. It's about being alone. It's about being disconnected. And the more that I kind of dive into those deeper layers, the more I'm like, okay, this feels way older than just
Mm.
what I've experienced in this lifetime. This feels like it's it feels like it's in my DNA. It's
Yeah.
been something I'm hearing for so long. And so as I've myself personally worked through it, I have learned to really pay attention to those experiences that I have that sort of like reignite those feelings. And when I go through those experiences, I can observe them and be like, wow, like this is triggering me.
Mm.
And I'm going to sit with this. And I kind of like visualize myself like wrapping myself in like a bubble of love and being like, just like, I have everything I need already. I'm okay. I'm just going to like let this emotion kind of move through me and hold myself in like love.
Yeah.
And then it
Mm.
moves through. And so it's not necessary to have memories, of your past lives or your ancestral, karma or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's really the emphasis is on just meeting those harder aspects of yourself with like self-love,
Yeah.
bubbling.
Okay. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Tuning into what it presents, and I guess not running from it, but sitting with it and allowing it to transmute, sort of thing, or encouraging the transmutation yourself, right?
yeah,
Not running from. Okay. Yeah, and in that process, you don't need to rationalize it, yeah, and find out, sort of what side of the war you may have been on, or how it happened. That's just, I guess that can be some extra thing just for the sake of it, but it's not really that relevant to your own personal healing or progression.
exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
because it's the karma is the karmic ripple is the remembrance of the emotion. It's the emotion that carries the frequency. And so if we're
Mm.
thinking working, with like sound healing and whatnot, like it's the frequency, it's the emotion that we want to be focusing on. The rest of it is just kind of, a little bit of
Mm.
extra color. speak.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I guess, yeah. And see, I'm into stories, and movies, and so yeah, yeah. It's very easy for me to start going past, so trying to go more into the expression of the story behind it instead of maybe the direct sort of lesson that is presented. I'm
Yeah,
in there trying to recognize all the different archetypes, and then the plots, and the hero's journey being expressed through things. And yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I wonder whether that's maybe common common for men to overlook the thing that's right there, and try and go deeper, and yeah, I wonder. I think it's
yeah,
common for me.
yeah. No, it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of self-awareness, which is something that again you
Mm,
develop over time. But
yeah.
um, kind of coming back to like our conversation around meditation, how the different types of meditation, the one where you're focusing, where you're learning the ability to like kind of narrow in your attention, that bringing this back to connecting with the body, the physical body, um, when we can all do energy work on ourselves, like we can all do healing
Mm,
work on ourselves. I think honestly that's probably the thing we're all working up towards, is like realizing, oh, I am my own healer. We don't need to rely on
mhm.
other people, like I can do it myself. um, and so I was, to kind of like highlight, to tie this all together and highlight this, I was working with a patient again, literally yesterday. He's like 80, I think he's 88, 89 years old. Not somebody that I think anybody would ever have guessed would be somebody who would work with me. Um,
Cool.
he's had, layers. Like when we first started working together, I was like, oh, you have a complex relationship to women. Like there's some stuff to work through here. But we've peeled back so many layers. And just yesterday he came into the session, and I was asking about how the pain was in his body, and he was like, it's been really good since last session. It's come on, but what I want to do is I want you to teach me how to connect to my wife. And I was like,
Mm.
oh. And his wife had passed away a few years ago, and he's just been like really, like
Uh,
he missed so much. Yeah. And so I had this challenge of like, okay, how do I break this down to like teach somebody their to develop their awareness so that they can then like energetically connect to the spirits of their loved ones, or
mm,
any kind of like energetic being, like spirit guides, or it doesn't even really matter who or what. And so we went through a little exercise. He was lying on my table, and I was working on him. I was like, okay, let's address some of your hip pain first. But then it kind of morphed, of course, as the session went on. And I started taking him through an exercise where, I was hands off. I wasn't interfering with his physical body, but I was kind of guiding him to tune inward and just think like, okay, like what do you feel in your body? Like if you were to just close your eyes, what do you feel in your body? And naturally, he was like, I feel my hip pain. Like I feel my hip pain. That's all I can feel. And I was
mhm,
like, okay, well, let's qualify the hip pain. Let's, what does it feel like? What are you noticing? And then what do you feel? What else do you feel? And he was like, well, I don't know. That's all I feel. And I was like, just like take a minute, like tune in. Like what else do you notice in your body? And so we kind of went through this a few times where just he practiced, developing that awareness of like, what is he even noticing in his body? Because I think the body can be such a powerful messenger for the information that we want to learn about how to grow and heal. And we got to a point where he started to identify these more nuanced places in his body, and he was like, oh yeah, this my actually my left hip is kind of sore. I haven't really noticed that before. And so then we took it to another step, and I was like, I want you to just sort of concentrate on your left, on this spot of soreness. I want you to just focus on it for a few minutes here. And I want you to let me know if you notice any changes. Like what comes into your awareness? The more you focus on your pain, how do things shift? And and practicing, like I was saying, that meditative ability to really like concentrate on one focal spot.
Mm.
And so after a few I checked him again and I was like, what are you noticing? And he was like, it's gone. It went away. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. So like maybe just you attending to something will help it shift, will help it
Mm.
move. Maybe just the practice of putting our attention and our energy on something is enough to stimulate a change. And it was, we'll see what his retention of that lesson is, but it was really powerful in the moment. And then we kind of took it to another spot in his body where he was feeling tightness in his like lower abdomen. And this might be kind of like fun information for you too, but he was focusing on his lower abdomen, and I was like, okay, we're gonna do the same thing, just attend to it and see how it changes. And after a few moments, he told me, he was like, I, I'm thinking about the guns that I have in my closet. Like he's a farmer, kind of agricultural type. He's got like hunting guns and whatnot. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. What about them? And he was like, some of them are loaded, and I'm thinking that maybe it would be good for me to just go look at them without using them. And I was like, this is the information is coming into his mind from him focusing on this one region of tightness in his body, that has to do with kind of a heavy topic where he has missed his wife so much, and he's older. He has
Mm.
thought about ending his life. He's thought about just trying to shortcut and like rejoin with his wife in heaven. And I was like, so maybe, this spot of tension in your body is communicating to you that those sort of like suicidal ideations are not, they're not aligned. It's like not an aligned action for you. And it kind of, it just like all came through to him without me having to do anything. It was like
Mm.
him having this realization on his own that maybe that's not, in his best interest. And what was really cool about that experience was that it wasn't that the tightness did go away after we kind of talked that out, but while he was meditating on this tightness in his body, he was having this information come into his mind's eye. He was having this information come in through his cognitive awareness for some really heavy stuff that he has not been really directly, you know, addressing.
Yeah.
And, just this simple exercise of meditating on these different spots in the body helped him to kind of release some of the energetic resistance that he had around, having to stay on earth a little bit longer with, enduring the suffering of missing his wife so much. And yeah, it's there's many different ways, kind of tying, I think, all of our conversation together. There's many different ways of moving energy in the body and addressing them, but really, I think the biggest one is like attending to something, like learning to like listen and to like attend to it. And movement can be that way. Movement can
Mm.
highlight where things feel tight or restricted or maybe sore or painful or off. But meditation can do that as well. You can just go inward and you can think like, what am I noticing? What feels tight? What feels sore? What feels
Mm.
painful? And breath work is another amazing way to do that too. There's all these different modalities. And the more, all of it is just guiding us towards how do we just put our attention inward, enough
Yeah.
to kind of clear this baggage we carry, the karma, the
Yeah.
baggage and the karma.
Yeah. 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 I think that's a great way of um simplifying things. It's something I say as well. Like it's within, and how are you going to find your way within is kind of up to you. There's lots of ways, and you'll find preferences along the way. You might find some things a little more direct, some things a bit softer. But I feel like essentially it is it is up to you to go within and bring the resolution yourself, or allow for these things to be resolved. You don't necessarily need to be active in resolving them. I don't think. I think you might need to be active in creating the state for them to resolve themselves. But
Exactly.
yeah. I think it is quite simple, really.
Yeah.
The answers are within. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
Mm.
Well, Sam, I have to get because I've got a patient coming up, but it was
Yeah,
so
sure.
talking to you. This was an amazing live, and it's been really cool getting to hear a lot
Mm.
about, your experiences and your journey in this realm. And it's I'm the more that I get to connect with other people who enjoy exploring this this stuff is like, the
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
It's so important, and so thank you for having these very open
Mm.
conversations with me.
Thanks for coming, and thanks for the well, I don't know if you realized, but there was advice given as well, whether it was purposeful or not, but it's taken. It's good. It's good. I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope to
Mm.
keep more in the future as well.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Take care and enjoy your treatment with your client,
Thank
and yeah,
you.
wishing you all the best.
Thank you. Bye, Sam.
Right. Cool. So is that? I think it's the fourth. Yeah, that was the fourth episode. I'm into its conclusion. I think some people may have joined right at the end. It really, Arrow's still here, and maybe, but it'll be. Hey, how are you doing, Arrow? But anyways, I'm gonna upload it so you can watch it if you like. We were talking about some really cool topics actually. Went beyond the concepts of physical body work to past lives, and yeah, and Alex is still here. Yes. Arrow's going stargazing. Awesome. Yeah, just about got dark. Got all dark in the boat. We'll turn more lights on and sort the fire out. Anyway, guys, feel free to watch this on my Instagram wall, whatever, and make sure you check out the next live. I'm getting some cool guests coming on. And also, if anyone who has watched this wants to come up and chat about what they do, then just drop me a message and we can arrange it. Yeah, cool. Peace, everyone. Have a great